Hey, what's up, Toby? We made it another week.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you.
Today we've got a guest.
Indeed, we do.
We only go with the best, and so we've got Dr. Adam Link today. He is not a doctor that provides Tylenol. He is a
Of
doctor
sorts.
of
Of sorts.
computer science, which obviously means that he's a financial advisor.
That is exactly right.
So, Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Adam,
Yeah.
connect the dots for us a little bit in your audience,
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm happy to link it all together. And that's the last joke I'll tell. All right. So I basically started out in finance, and did capital markets finance out of college. Really loved the whole finance and economics stuff.
Yep.
And along with that, I was the guy that would write the impeccable Excel models with multiple lines of code, and then, actually dropping into functions and, things that people didn't know you could even do in Excel.
We talk in this audience. Okay. You've got us at formulas in Excel.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'd use IDEs to write Excel statements. And for those of you who got that, we're all nerds here. So that was probably my first tip off that I probably should have been working in tech. And then, I basically through a number of startups and some luck ended up landing a role in tech with a company that wanted to kind of grow a mobile app studio. And so spent a bunch of time as a back-end engineer. I am not a front-end person. I do not do CSS, but I can do back-end, I can do infrastructure, and spent, over a decade of my life in tech doing that, anywhere from individual contributor to manager. And I kept being the person that would talk about finance with my teammates. And, things like, well, hey, have you guys considered a mega backdoor Roth? Are you maxing out your retirement account contributions?
I'm sure they all love that when all they wanted to do is like figure out how to fix a bad join statement that's buried somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Details. That's funny.
I do love, and we'll get to our topic here in just a smidge, but I would absolutely love the fact that we're going back to finance. So I have a finance degree. Toby, you have a finance degree, right?
I do have a finance degree.
I hated finance. I got to my third year of finance and I was like, I hate this. This stinks. So I'm going to go do operations. Anyway, that was my deal. But I do love the finance tie-in, because managing your finance is a lot like managing your process. So keep going. How'd we end up as a financial advisor?
Yeah. Basically I was giving away free financial advice, as a passion, and, similar to writing multiple line formulas in Excel, giving away free financial advice as a passion was probably a tip off that it was time to switch back to being a financial advisor.
Yeah.
So I did that, and, basically one day said, hey, I should get paid for doing this. And in order to get paid to be a financial advisor, you got to get licensed. So I got licensed, got my CFP, hung out my own shingle, and, I've been helping friends, family, and tech folks kind of ever since.
I love it. Awesome. There's hot tip number one on the day from Dr. Adam, and it's, if you find yourself doing a lot of something for free, maybe you should switch horses and get a career. So
exactly,
right out of the gates, that's faster than usual. We usually aren't so succinct in getting to.
We can just end it here if we wanted to. Just be like, that's it. We're done.
It's so early. We're going to get a couple other nuggets, I think.
All right, I love it.
Plow forward. So
let's drill into our topic today. So what we wanted to talk about was just how bad assumptions lead to bad outcomes. I think that in the process realm, so important. And Adam has some horror stories from his corporate world.
Yes, I certainly do. And, kind of keeping with the technology side here. So I have a lot of examples from software engineering. And in software engineering, we have a very short cycle time, right? You write code, you test it with inputs. If you get the output you want, it probably works. You move forward, right?
Yep.
In your life, it's basically testing in production. So you have no idea whether or not it's going to work. And then when you test and there's a bug, that was in prod. So, you got to move
that's
forward.
Parenting 101.
Exactly. Yes, it is. I've got two kids. I think of them as 18-year test experiments. We'll see if it works out or not.
I love it. Testing in prod. That's true, right?
That's 2 out of the gate, man. We're not even 5 minutes in. Like, keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so when you think about, testing and fraud, right? Like when you talk about bad assumptions leading to bad outcomes, right? That's a lot of what we do in programming is you make an assumption, you test it, and then you move forward and you find whether or not that assumption was right.
Yep.
And when you test and prod, you made a bad assumption. Now you have a production incident, and so in the case of finance, it compounds with time, right? So let's say you made the decision to not invest in your 401k. Now here you are in your 50s. Yeah. Well, that was a really bad decision for 30 years and you tested and prod. You can't go back to being 21, right? And so the longer you wait, exactly, right? Yeah, the longer you wait, the more these things become catastrophic incidents in production, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Amazon goes down for the day. You're like, that's a problem. And for you non-tech types, I was not talking about their warehouse going down. I was talking about like a large percentage of the internet backbone is built on Amazon's back, which is a crazy deal. One of the things that struck me as we were about ready to have this conversation is there is a time value of money that is not understood as much as maybe it should be. But I think that correlates a lot to just what would be kind of like a time value of good process, right? Where it's like, it's these little tiny changes, like you've probably seen times where entire websites have gone down with a single line of code, right? And now we're not necessarily talking about that type of change in code, but we are talking about small little incremental changes that snowball over time. And why don't we spend some time talking through kind of that concept and how that works in finance? Because I do think, my kids, I think we all have kids around the same age, like later teens, but like they go through all high school and they don't understand that, like, look, if you just start to put money away and you put it in the market, like over time, historically, you're going to do well, right? Same with your health, right? You go out and you work out and you move and you get your heart rate over X amount for 150 hours, you're going to be okay. But let's spend some time drilling into that.
Yeah. So one of the things that you hear a lot is, you save early, save often, and you'll be fine. And really what that gets to is the wonders of compound interest.
Yeah.
To probably misquote Albert Einstein, who's attributed this quote, it's the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Yeah. I don't know if you said it, but I sound smart when I say that. So
I like it.
Exactly, right? Really, when you look at compound interest, this is one of those things that people don't necessarily think about enough. So let me use a simple example, right? You start at $100 and you make 10% a year.
Yep.
Right. After 1 year, you've made $10. Now, it's not a lot of money, right? Depending on when you're listening to this, that might buy you, a gallon of gas, maybe 2 gallons of gas. Yeah, it's an oil price joke, right?
Love it.
So, yeah. So, that $10 is not a lot, right? But now let's think about that same 10% on $100 million, right? And that's $10 million in a year, right? That's $1 million a month, right? Like that's insane amounts of money, right? Yeah. And so when you start thinking about compound interest, right, 10% returns year in and year out on a increasing base amount of money eventually becomes real money. Yeah. And so the sooner you start that, right, $10 on 100, the next year it's 10% on $110 is $11, right? And as you continue doing that, eventually you end up with $2 million and you get 10% on $2 million. That's $200,000, right? Now it's enough money to live on.
Yeah.
So that's what we talk about when that one little change, you just start saving. The earlier you do it, the more it matters.
Yeah.
Right.
I do think this is really interesting. There's a local, one of those like predatory loan companies where I'm at, where it's like, we only charge interest once a day. And my little finance brain goes, whoa. You're like, they're doing that because they make more money. I imagine people without that literacy of understanding the system that they're working in are like, oh man, that's so nice of them. And I'm like, oh boy, let's not do that. So let's
it's a huge gap. I love that call out, Chris, because to your point about basic literacy, whether we're talking about how a business works and the basic processes. These are about how we manage a healthy life in all of the attributes you described. There are investments and there's also things to maintain. And when it comes to health, we talk a lot about habits. We don't think as much about process. And so in the business, boring process is often treated as something to shy away from, when in fact, boring habits in our personal lives are something we embrace. If I always eat healthy, I always sleep 8 hours, I always put money away.
Yeah.
There's assumptions that people do or don't make. And just like financial literacy, there's some of these fundamental assumptions and I think probably myths that are often made. And so if personal habits are just like boring processes in the workplace, what are some of those personal habits, Adam, that you're seeing as you're talking with folks, certainly through this financial lens, but I just imagine you're having a lot of these assumptions that people are sharing and you have to explain why that's not how gravity works.
Yes. Well, I'll give you one that I love, that I see all the time. People will say, well, I can't afford to contribute to my company's retirement plan right now. Right. I just don't have the money. Horrible assumption, because if your company matches your retirement contribution, you should always contribute at least the amount that they match, because that is a 100% guaranteed return. Okay. Now, we don't use the word guaranteed a lot in finance. Assuming your company doesn't go under in the course of that year, you put in 3% to your paycheck and they match 3%, that is a 100% return. Yeah. I know of no investment that can guarantee a 100% return in a single year.
Yep. Right? Third truth bomb right there. 100% rate of return. You heard it here.
Yep, exactly.
Full match and laugh all the way to the bank.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yep. Yeah. And again, that is one of those things you start doing when you're young and you're making massive returns. And again, the dollar amounts may not be big, but you start getting into that habit. The next thing you can do on those retirement accounts, people love to spend money when they get a raise. So what I do, and a lot of companies that offer like plans through Fidelity will do this, they have an automatic increase every year. And you can set the amount of money to increase your retirement account contributions by. Yeah. I've got mine set to anywhere between 1% to 3% every year. And the idea is, look, inflation goes up about 2% every year. And so you're just going to jack up the amount to keep in line with inflation. Yeah. And without even knowing it, you're just sending more of your paycheck over there. So you get that 3% raise, 3% increase in your retirement account contribution. Yeah. You're still contributing the same amount.
Adam, those sound awfully boring.
Yes.
Which means we're doing something right if people are following this advice. I love that. I love
exactly.
that.
Yep. That's the best stuff in finance. If it's boring, you set it once and it just scales. Like, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we just talk about processes in general, right? Yeah. This is one of those, I'm going to help my future self by doing a thing, right? Where to go and take $5 or $10 out of a paycheck is generally like, even if that's your start, like, and you increase that over time, like there's so many correlations between just knowing what your future self, like what you want in retirement, and just making simple acts today. Like, I think we miss that in our business lives because we get so busy and we don't think. Like, one of the things that I've been kind of rattling around is like, what I want to be in my knowledge work is a craftsman. Like, that's what I want to be. Like, just someone who does really, really excellent work using the tools that he has at his disposal and is really proud of the work that he delivers. And if I can start from that point, it just makes me choosing what I do, it makes it more obvious versus being a reactive, person that's just head on a swivel trying to figure out what's coming at me. I wanted to kind of switch topics here slightly, if that's okay, Adam. And I wanted to talk about tech debt and what tech debt is. And then I want to kind of talk about how that kind of relates to just, our concept of process debt, which is really where we came up with it. Whereas, I'm a business degree, an operations degree. I ended up in the tech world and I'm like, tech debt, man, that's a big deal. And then I was like, no one owns process debt. I'm going to go get that domain. And I was like, hey, Toby, you want to chat every week? And so that's where this all came about. But tell us about tech debt. If you have horror stories of the worst tech debt that you've ever seen, that would be fantastic. But tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Yeah. So tech debt. Okay. Well, let's start with, so most tech folks hear the word tech debt and they instantly think bad code or, someone took a shortcut, right? And that really is what tech debt is you made the decision to take a shortcut in either process or code or resiliency or framework or something in order to ship a product faster, right? But one of the cool things about tech debt is the second word in that, which is debt. And so when you look at the finance realm, tech debt and financial debt are very much the same.
Yeah.
When you run a business, you can scale beyond your current capacity by taking on debt. You take out a loan, you get money today with the promise of paying it off in the future.
Yep.
Now, too little debt is actually bad because you could have grown bigger, right? You could have supported more.
Yeah.
In business, right? Generally, for a person, it's different. But in business, right? Like, you can support a $10 million loan and you can support the interest payments. You should probably think about growing, right? That's how you say it. Same thing with tech debt. No tech debt, I'd argue, is actually bad because it means you are taking too long to ship.
Yep.
But conversely, if you take on so much financial debt that you can't even make your interest payments, that is very similar to a company that took on so much tech debt that they can no longer ship new features because they are just buried under the weight of bugs and operational processes that are breaking.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I look at it, right? It's like, and the minute you put those two together as a software engineer, you're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Like that's why tech debt is bad. And also that's why financial debt, right? Like you suddenly go, oh, I can make this case to a junior engineer really fast why I need unit tests, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And just for everybody non-technical, a unit test is basically putting your code through basically a test to say, are all the ins and outs and all the logic trees match, right? So I only know that because I was a product manager on a dev team and most dev companies want 100% code coverage. And I think this is why I lean towards process debt is if you go to the business world and you look at a PowerPoint, there is no such thing as a unit test. There is a, hey, does this meet my cognitive bias test? Right. And it's two completely different worlds. And yet if you look at what scales, right, the tech generally does scale because it's all true false logic trees, right? For the most part. You go into a business and knowledge work oftentimes is a lot more squishy.
Yes, it is. That's why I like computers. It's said financial advisor, right? Yeah, exactly. No, that's very true, right? Because when you look at a unit test, and I love picking a unit test because as a software developer, no one likes to write unit tests. No one likes to sit down and say, okay, I checked every single possible logic branch here and they all work. Yay. I wrote 10 lines of code and 200 lines of unit tests. That's just not. But no, I totally get it. From a PowerPoint perspective as well, right? If you're designing a process, when you think about a process, a good process is repeatable, scalable, right? Gives you the same outcome for every given input.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in with a slightly different question because I'm curious because of the intersection, coming from a very structured coding world where we test outside of production, right? Unlike parenting. One of the things that I'm sure you have conversations around, and it's akin to a lot of our process debt conversation, is that you come to a point where you are up and running and your organization's been operating for a number of years, but the processes aren't going to get you to where you want to be. And that could be either as a less involved owner, it could be positioning a business for sale. It could be just struggling to keep good people around, right?
Yeah.
And so we bump into boundaries at different times. There's an equivalency in the financial world, which is we've only kind of done the habits we're supposed to do. And, there's this window now where compound interest at 10% in a stock market isn't necessarily going to get you to the retirement numbers. So in the process world, what we do is we say, call the ball for a second. Let's rethink the process and then re-educate the team to operate differently. And we can turn around a business and business process in, just a matter of months. But that doesn't necessarily hold true. That analogy doesn't hold true in the financial world. And so as you're talking with clients, what is the case where bad practices have left them, 70% short of where they need to be retirement as they hit 50s, right? Because they are testing in production and have discovered that their methods are failing. So aside from like spend less and move to the cheapest country in the world, I hear Iran is increasingly cheap these days.
Great real estate market.
It's a little dangerous, but how do you have those conversations, Adam? Because you come from this very healthy, structured world. I'm just kind of curious. Maybe you also deal with younger clients, and most of the time you're like, that's a problem I don't deal with. Take that to some old. So
yeah, no. So I do deal with that problem actually. And one of the things that I like to do in my practice is run what are called Monte Carlo simulations. So we basically take a series of returns in the stock market and run thousands of simulations over multiple different types of returns and say, in how many of these simulations does our plan work out, right? So that's like the first step is we just get a baseline of like, okay, we're testing in production, but where are we? And that's kind of our barometer. Like, are we at 85% pass rate? Like solid, we're probably good. Are you 50 and we're at a 25% pass rate? Well, that's not good. It's never bad, but it's not good. But really what you start looking at then is what are the levers that we have, right?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, a client that comes to me with $10 million that spends $10,000 a year, okay, you're going to be fine. Like we had different discussions to have around estate planning at that point, and those are fun, right? But for some other people, it's like, okay, well, I'm almost there, but I'm not quite there. How do we get there, right?
Yeah.
And then you start looking, like you said, at some of the processes. How are you spending your money? Where are you spending your money, right? Is there a better way we could save money in a process? Do we need to take more risk to get higher returns, right?
Mm-hmm.
More risk, more reward, obviously greater chance of going down.
Yeah.
But for some people, we're never going to say, go to the casino and bet it all on black. But there's a classic example of like, you want to turn your fortune around real fast, that's high risk, high reward, right? So we start looking at, things like that. And then we also start saying, okay, well, do we have to re-envision what retirement looks like? Do you work longer? And I've had some of these discussions before where you go, I hate to break it to you, but this is your retirement. Your retirement is Social Security and the pension you got.
Right.
And you don't have $1 million in the bank. You will never have $1 million in the bank. And you get to live on $6,000, a month or less. And that's what you got.
Yep.
So, maybe Costa Rica is an answer, or, maybe it's you get a roommate and you didn't expect that at 70, but that's so for some people, time has passed and testing in production sometimes does lead to a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
And that's why I try to catch them early, because those are not fun conversations to have.
I love that.
The other thing that I was thinking about is like how often budgets act like silos. And we've talked about silos in process step before, and that like, and you've probably seen this in your past where people don't think as the entire system. They only think about improving one section, right? And so an obvious one is food, right? So we could all probably reduce our food spend a lot, but most of us have I'm going to go out to eat food spend, right? And we're going to be like, oh my gosh, did you know that the burger is $10? Like you can't get a Happy Meal anymore or whatever. I said Happy Meal. I don't know what, I'm like 12.
Dude, I love my Happy Meals. Most of them coins. Like baseball cards just for the gun. Yeah.
But then you're like, okay, well, I could go to the grocery store. I could get, some rice and some really nice chicken and feed my entire family of for that same amount, but that lands on us differently, right? And so you see these caveats or these comparisons in the financial world as well as process, right? So in a business, when we're working in teams, you've got these silos that are super efficient that basically are causing major pain downstream because they don't understand, they basically they're not systems thinkers.
Too siloed, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll I'll kind of take that example and expand upon it a little bit, right? So in finance, we see this all the time. It's called mental accounting, where people basically have money set aside for one thing and not another. So there'll be $10,000 in credit card debt and they'll have $20,000 in savings. And they say, well, that's my emergency fund. I don't touch that. Well, the mathematical proper thing to do is use your emergency fund to pay down your credit card debt, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, in a process, if you run in a silo, you'd be super efficient, right? But you know what the most efficient process is for one person to do one thing all day long.
Yeah.
But you know where that is not as efficient? Employee retention, because employees like to be challenged, right? So you've optimized one process and totally screwed over another process, right? And so that's what we deal with all the time in financial advising. It's like, okay, well, I get that you don't want to pay down your credit card debt, right? But financially, the right thing to do mathematically is pay down the credit card debt. But what if I've just screwed over your emotional stability process, right? Let's say you grew up with no money and this $20,000 in savings is more than your parents ever had. That is your emotional safety net, your mental health.
Right. Yeah.
And like, I can optimize your math process, but that's your mental health. Right. And so it's like, okay, now I got two conflicting processes, right?
Yeah. I love that. Chris, Adam, that's spot on. Chris and I have talked a lot of times about how pieces of the process are sacred. Organizations have sacred cows. Sometimes it's some jackal in another department that you can't ever scold and they're never ruffling. We've all had that guy or gal. Other times it's this is the way we do it. And especially if a founder sets it up, and I've had clients in the past where they've always done it that way. That's how they learned it. Nothing else could change it. And so I love the call out of that emotional safety net because it's so true in business process, not just in our financial world. So I think that's number 4 in the awesome insights from Dr. Adam today. So
it reminds me of like people's resistance to change. Boy, yeah. Right. Like it's just very interesting. Like we as humans are just so funny because we have like all of these fears around if someone takes something from me, then I'm going to be deficient. And I know, Toby, you've dealt with this for years in your consulting practice, which is just change management is hard because you almost have to like, it's so much less about the technology and more about creating that safety net that people can kind of land in and like find their home quickly. Right. Like I know that like, because what's interesting is I'm going to take this back to where we were talking a little bit earlier. Like Adam, you do the same thing I did every year. I basically just bumped when I got a pay raise, I just bumped my 401k and all of a sudden you're like, wait a sec, this is snowballing like crazy. And as I was recently switching away from my corporate job to doing, Toby and I doing our implementation consulting, I basically dropped my 401k down to nothing. Or actually I didn't drop it. I took my 100% gain. I did do that, but I dropped it down to that so that I could basically do what I know that I needed to do. But that was a really big psychological shift for me, right? Of like, oh shoot, I'm making a major change. And it was purely emotional, but like I was holding on to that. It's got to go up. It's got to go up. And sometimes it's just that simple, like I'm going to change it from 16% down to 15%. And that little bit of like autonomy is super powerful for making sure that we're making almost like, I don't know, you'd call them like non-triggered actions that basically lead to preventing us from doing the right thing. It's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on some like the emotional stability too. And we see this actually in people's lives when you start thinking about finances. I'm sure everyone has that friend who is, in an equal position, equal earner, and yet never seems to have money, right?
Yeah.
Or that friend who's never made that much in their entire life, but yet they're always fine and they always have cash. And what you're dealing with there is when you think about a process, it's a multi-generational process of where they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Right. That if you came from a background where your parents never had enough and they were always scraping by, there is this kind of process of you will always go back to scraping by unless you start to recognize and change that process. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, you'll spend it all because that's the only thing you know is to be in this state of scraping by. Right. So you can make $1 million a year and still be broke.
Yep.
Right. And conversely, you get other people who are like, all we ever did was save, 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 save. Doesn't matter how much money we made, we always saved. You'll have a ton of cash. Right.
Well, yeah. And the interesting thing is sometimes those people are emotionally in the same place. Right. So you have that person that's like, they're spending and they're basically scraping by regardless of income. You know, like and I'm sure you've seen it where people are pulling in $250,000 a year and it's like, I can't make it. You're like, well, I mean, you could get rid of the boat and you could get rid of the RV and you could get rid of the second home. Like these are things that you could do. But then you can also have those other people that are so afraid to lose. They're like, they're sitting on just a cash pile that we would all be envious of. And they still have that fear of discomfort, fear of loss, fear of, you know, on the one hand, you have the fear of loss. And on the other hand, you have the fear of not being able to keep it. So or not being able to hold on to it. So you're always spending it. Like there is a lot of psychology in process and process debt. And I think like it gets hypercharged when it comes to finances.
Well said.
Yeah, definitely agree.
I want to loop back to something Chris touched on, because I think you, Adam, you sit in this really beautiful place to appreciate the corporate world, but also appreciate starting your own venture. And so Chris had mentioned a moment ago, I was maxing things out. And as a corporate employee, it was very simple. I had a wage that was pretty predictable. So it was kind of like an annuity. I knew what I needed to do. They would pay me my money. Like that's kind of the normal corporate arrangement. And under that world, we have a very predictable inflow, a very predictable budget, and we can add to our retirement. We can pretty much calculate our trajectory. But I think that many of us, and certainly the three of us on this call, also have a different need, and we want to see that return on our own energy investment, right? We've all started our own ventures. And so we gave up a super predictable income cash flow for something much more high risk. But I think a lot of folks struggle to put that in context in terms of what value does that create. So when you talk with business owners, you know, Chris made a great call. Oh, crap, I gave up my 100% return on my company match and I've foregone, you know, predictable income, but I have ambitions and I have hopes for how this business evolves. How do you think about and talk with business owners about putting their business in context in that financial picture? Because I think this is a really difficult element and a source of a lot of angst.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first one is you're absolutely right that mathematically and financially, it really doesn't make sense in many cases to go do your own business and leave the corporate world because there is safety and predictability, right? Yeah. And yet we all do it. Why? Because really we're maximizing for something other than money, right? And that's why you go start your own business, because quite frankly, the best money move is to not start your own business. Your probability of, you know, succeeding and getting as much as a corporate person is incredibly low. I hate to break it to all the entrepreneurs out there.
Oh,
yeah, I know.
You know what? Okay.
But
okay, it's funny because Toby has said before, like what you just said was the kindest thing to say, right? Which is the 100% truth. Right now, that obviously, you know, Toby and I are well aware of that, but it's interesting in that, like, just in what you do, you have to say the kind thing, and sometimes the kind thing is not the nice thing. And so, anyway, so you can,
yeah, yeah. I will say though, you know, there's a big but in that, right? Which is, but if you're maximizing for the life you want to live and not just money, right? That's where you start finding value in things that are not necessarily cash, right? And so as you own your own business, right, you gain autonomy, you gain the ability to set strategy and execute and, you know, kind of succeed or fail on your own merit. And there's a lot of value to you as a human being saying, look, I built that, I made that, right? I've got the hero's journey. And a lot of what happens for small business owners is that hero's journey value gets wrapped up in the equity you build in your business.
Yeah.
And so now you are building cash value in your business, but you're also building an emotional tie. And when it comes time to sell the business, right? Let's say you're selling a business as your retirement plan. That's going to be incredibly hard because it's going to feel quite rightly like you're selling a child, right? Because you're emotionally invested in this thing.
And not your favorite child.
Exactly, right? But what you've done is you basically conflated money and emotion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now, you're selling an asset that has actual value because someone's willing to pay you for everything that you went through, but you got emotional bonds to what you went through. Right. Yeah. And so as you're prepping for a sale, like that's where you get conflicted of like, is it worth, let's throw out a number, I'm going to sell my business for $3, $4, $5 million. And some entrepreneurs look at that and say, I'm not going to take $5 million in this business.
Yeah.
It's not worth it to me. I have more emotionally invested in this than $5 million is worth.
Yeah.
Right. And like to most W-2 earning people on a normal job, saying no to $5 million seems like a ridiculous prospect.
Yeah.
Right. But as a business owner, you end up there sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not enough for our favorite child, but maybe your second favorite child, entertainment. And I love the call out, Adam, because we can't treat a purely financial decision without emotion. And we can't also neglect that emotional decisions have financial ramifications. And the world of entrepreneurship is absolutely more than about dollars. It's about self-actualization, and it's about some of the autonomy that comes with it. The three of us are recording a podcast in the middle of the workday. And what a beautiful thing. This may be the single most important conversation I've had all day, but in a traditional corporate world, this isn't part of the equation. So I do have one last question, but I bet Chris does too. So Chris, if you want to go first, and then
go ahead and ask your question, then I'll wrap us up.
Okay. So Adam, you talked about my favorite strategy, which is to take my entire retirement, tricky to say, to Vegas, put it on black, and see how the ball lands. Somewhere between that and T-bonds is other things. So the market plays plus or minus 10%, right? A good financial advisor is not going to tell me to go do crazier stuff. But a doctor of computer science might have slightly different advice about there's a series of investments that fall between stock market and blackjack tables.
Mm-hmm.
So for investors that want to start to think about non-traditional investments, you're having these conversations all day. If I were to develop the process acumen, right? Is it about real estate investment? I'm sure we all know very wealthy folks that have done well with real estate. Is it about this world of new fictional money in the world of Bitcoin and NFTs? Is it something else? Is it business ownership? Like where do you see some of those higher returns as you talk with clients? And what is that skill that allows them to effectively secure those 20+% returns without all the perceived risk of Las Vegas?
Yeah, great questions. So let's start with kind of the first thing I'll give you for just general advice when you think about how you allocate your investments. Take risks in one area of your life. And don't take risks in all areas of your life. So if you are a W-2 employee, you can probably take more risks in your investing. If you are an entrepreneur, you should probably take less risks in your investing, right? As an entrepreneur, you are risking your income to build a business. So maybe don't also swing for the fences in your portfolio, right? But you would be surprised how many people want to do both. And it's like, okay, well, look, if the market goes down and your business collapses, guess what? You have nothing. That is wiped out risk, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is when you look at additional risk beyond stock ownership, right? Just like public market stocks. A lot of folks want to talk about passive income in real estate and passive income in business ownership. There's no such thing as passive income. You will be working. You'll be working way more than you think. I know I own passive real estate. It is way more work than you could possibly think. I've been up on the roof of a passive investment before. And let me tell you, when you are up on the roof of your passive real estate income, that is not passive.
Love
It is
it.
it is an active risk, very active and very nice. So yeah, that's honestly when people start looking at alternative investments like that. I will say, one of the things that we do at Fireweed Capital, we do actively do what's called active risk management. So we do take stances on the market, and we do actively manage portfolios for our clients. That kind of helps people when the market does something, they know we're doing something, right? And so that is one of the ways that we do help people get returns a little bit beyond what the market does, and just position different ways to the market. So there's one. The other way to look at it is, you have a set of money set aside for those higher risk, higher return investments. And if that's angel investing, or if that's venture capital, or it's real estate, at the end of the day, it all comes down to, like you said, the process. Because you are now moving from a kind of a buffet of, here are all the options you have in the public markets, pick one. Yep. And you're now going to the grocery store, where you got the raw ingredients, and you are either going to make something great, or maybe something horrible, or something meh. But you can look at the same steak a Michelin star chef can look at, and you're going to have a different steak than they will. So it's all about the process.
Very cool. I think you highlighted something so critical, not only with your financial health, but also with your process health, which is take bets on small portions of the whole, right? And so oftentimes when we think about finances or even our processes, we're like, oh my gosh, they're all terrible, or we can't do that. No, you can go experiment with 1% of your income and have zero, like basically not have actually a more fuller life, because you're actually taking risks, because life is more full when you're making bets. And if you have that constraint where you're like only going to bet a certain small percent of 1%, you're not really going to ever hurt yourself, and you're probably going to have a lot of fun, and you're going to be more fun at parties. So you should absolutely do that. So Adam, tell us how our listeners can reach you, how they can find you.
Yeah. So we've got a website, fireweedcapital.com, or you can email me directly, adam@fireweedcapital.com. I love to talk finance. I obviously love to talk tech. And so if either of those things sound interesting, shoot me an email. We can get on a call. We can chat.
Very cool. Well, Adam, it's actually been an absolute pleasure.
Adam, I just want to go on record and say, love the conversation. Exclusively for our listeners, is that first conversation free? Are you able to discount something on that first call?
Oh, yeah. The first conversation, certainly free. Yep. Free for the listeners.
Awesome.
Yep.
Only for Process Debt listeners. And anybody else that knows Adam and is willing to track him down and pick his brain. No.
That's awesome.
Adam, I love it. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, guys.